Hello, my friend. I have a question for you. How many grammar books do you own? How many hours have you spent studying present perfect, past continuous, and conditional sentences? How many times have you memorized the rules for using a, an, and the? If you're like most English learners, the answer is probably too many to count. But here's another question. After all that grammar study, can you speak English naturally and fluently? Can you have a conversation without stopping to think about rules? If you're watching this video, I'm guessing the answer is no. And that's okay. You're not alone. Millions of English learners around the world are stuck in the same place. They know grammar rules better than many native speakers, but they can't speak naturally. Today, I want to tell you something that might shock you. Something that grammar teachers don't want you to know. Are you ready? Here it is. Studying grammar is actually making your English worse. I know this sounds crazy. Your teachers told you to study grammar. Your textbooks are full of grammar rules. Every English course starts with grammar lessons. But I'm going to prove to you that grammar study is the biggest obstacle between you and fluent English. Let me tell you a story that will change everything you think you know about learning English. 5 years ago, I taught English to two students. Their names were Alex and Ben. They were both 25 years old, both intelligent, both motivated to learn English. They started learning English at exactly the same time, with exactly the same level of knowledge. Alex was a perfectionist. He loved rules. He loved structure. He loved understanding exactly how things worked. On his first day, he asked me, "Teacher, can you recommend the best grammar book? I want to learn all the rules perfectly." I gave him a thick grammar book with 500 pages. Alex was so happy. He went home and started studying. Every day, he spent 2 hours memorizing grammar rules. He made flashcards for irregular verbs. He practiced exercises for conditional sentences. He studied the difference between since and for. He learned when to use who and when to use whom. Ben was different. He was impatient with rules. On his first day, he said, "Teacher, I don't want to study grammar. I just want to speak English like a native speaker. What should I do?" I gave Ben a simple advice. Listen to English content every day. Don't worry about understanding every word. Don't worry about grammar. Just listen and let your brain learn naturally. Ben started listening to English podcasts, watching English movies, and listening to English songs. He didn't study any grammar rules. He didn't memorize any verb forms. He just listened. After 6 months, I tested both students. The results were shocking. Alex could explain complex grammar rules. He could tell me the difference between the past perfect and the past perfect continuous. He could identify all the parts of speech in a sentence. But when I asked him to have a simple conversation, he struggled. He spoke very slowly, stopping every few words to think about grammar. He said things like, "Yesterday wait, is it went or have gone? I am confused." Ben was completely different. He couldn't explain any grammar rules. He didn't know the names of the tenses, but when I asked him to have a conversation, he spoke naturally and fluently. He made some small mistakes, but he communicated clearly and confidently. How was this possible? How could Ben speak better English without studying grammar? The answer will change everything you think you know about language learning. How children learn language. Let me ask you something. How did you learn your native language? Did you study grammar books when you were 3 years old? Did you memorize verb conjugations when you were 4? Did you practice conditional sentences when you were 5? Of course not. You learned your native language by listening. You heard your parents, your family, your friends speaking thousands of times. Your brain naturally discovered the patterns of your language. When you were a baby, you heard "good morning" every day. You didn't study a grammar rule that said, "Good morning is a greeting used in the early part of the day." You just heard it so many times that you understood its meaning and learned to use it correctly. When you were 2 years old, you started making sentences. Did you think about subject-verb agreement? Did you worry about using the correct tense? No, you just copied the patterns you heard. You said, "I want water," because you heard adults say, "I want" thousands of times. By the time you were 6 years old, you could speak your native language perfectly. You used complex grammar without thinking about it. You knew when something sounded right and when it sounded wrong. You had what we call language intuition. How did you develop this language intuition? Through repetition and pattern recognition. Your brain heard the same patterns over and over again until they became automatic. This is exactly how you should learn English. Not through grammar rules, but through natural pattern recognition. But here's what happens when you study grammar rules. Your brain switches from natural learning mode to analysis mode. Instead of learning patterns, you start analyzing sentences. Instead of developing language intuition, you start relying on rules. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you want to say, "I have been living in London for 3 years." If you learned this sentence naturally through repetition, you would just say it. It would feel right. But if you learned this sentence through grammar study, here's what happens in your brain. Okay, I want to express an action that started in the past and continues to the present. That's present, perfect, continuous. The structure is have, has been plus ing form. I am the subject, so I use have, not has. The verb is live, so the ing form is living. For time expressions that show duration, I use for, not since. Do you see the problem? By the time you finish thinking about all these rules, the conversation is over. Native speakers don't wait for you to analyze grammar. They speak naturally and expect you to keep up. This is why students like Alex struggle. They have so much grammar knowledge in their heads that they can't speak naturally. They're always thinking about rules instead of communicating. Here's something that might surprise you. Native English speakers make grammar mistakes all the time. They say things like, "Me and my friend went to the store," instead of, "My friend and I went to the store." They say, "I could care less," instead of, "I couldn't care less." They end sentences with prepositions. They split infinitives. But do these mistakes stop communication? No. Native speakers understand each other perfectly, even with grammar mistakes. Why? Because communication is about meaning, not perfect grammar. In real conversations, people care about your message, not your grammar. They want to understand what you're trying to say. They want to connect with you. They don't care if you use the past perfect or the simple past, as long as they understand your meaning. I've had thousands of conversations with native English speakers. Not once has anyone stopped me to correct my grammar. Not once has anyone said, "Excuse me, you should have used the present perfect in that sentence." But grammar study makes you think that perfect grammar is the most important thing. It makes you afraid to speak because you might make a mistake. It makes you focus on rules instead of communication. This is the grammar trap. The more you study grammar, the more afraid you become of making mistakes. The more afraid you become, the less you speak. The less you speak, the slower you improve. Let me tell you a secret. Your brain is incredibly good at learning grammar naturally. You don't need to study rules. You don't need to memorize patterns. You just need to give your brain enough examples. When you hear correct English thousands of times, your brain automatically learns the patterns. It's like a computer that analyzes data and finds the rules. But unlike a computer, your brain doesn't need to understand the rules consciously. It just knows what sounds right. This is called implicit learning. It's how you learned your native language, and it's how you should learn English. When you hear, "I have been living here for 3 years," many times, your brain learns the pattern. Later, when you want to express a similar idea, your brain automatically uses the correct pattern. You don't think, "I need to use present perfect continuous here." You just say, "I have been working here for 2 years," because it sounds right to your brain. This is much faster and more reliable than consciously applying grammar rules. Your brain can process patterns in milliseconds, but it takes seconds to remember and apply a grammar rule. Look around you. How many people do you know who learned English naturally, without studying grammar? Maybe they learned from movies, from music, from living in an English-speaking country. How well do they speak? Now think about people who learned English through grammar study. How naturally do they speak? How confident are they in conversations? I've met many English learners who moved to English-speaking countries without studying grammar. They learned English by listening and speaking every day. After a few years, they speak almost like native speakers. They make small mistakes, but they communicate naturally and confidently. I've also met many English learners who studied grammar for years before moving to English-speaking countries. Even after living there for years, they still struggle with natural conversation. They still think about rules when they speak. The evidence is clear. Natural learning works better than grammar study. So what should you do instead of studying grammar? You should use what I call the pattern recognition method. This is exactly what I taught Ben, and it's what made him successful. Here's how it works. Instead of studying grammar rules, you expose your brain to thousands of correct English patterns. You listen to English content every day. You focus on understanding meaning, not analyzing structure. When you hear a sentence like, "I wish I could speak English better," you don't analyze the grammar. You don't think, "This is a conditional sentence expressing a hypothetical desire." You just understand the meaning and let your brain store the pattern. After hearing similar patterns many times, your brain learns the rule naturally. Later, when you want to express a similar idea, you naturally say, "I wish I could travel more," or "I wish I could find a better job." You don't remember the grammar rule. You don't think about sentence structure. You just use the pattern because it feels right. This is how native speakers use grammar. They don't think about rules. They just use patterns they've heard thousands of times. Here's another important point. When you use the pattern recognition method, you will make mistakes. And that's perfectly okay. In fact, mistakes are an important part of learning. When you make a mistake and someone corrects you, your brain learns something new. It adjusts the pattern slightly. This is much more effective than memorizing rules because it's based on real experience. For example, maybe you say, "I am living in London since 3 years." A native speaker might say, "Oh, you mean you've been living in London for 3 years?" Your brain immediately learns the correct pattern. You don't need to study the present perfect continuous rule. You just experienced the correct pattern in context. This is natural error correction. It's how children learn their native language. They make mistakes. Adults correct them gently, and they learn the right pattern. But when you study grammar rules, you become afraid of making mistakes. You speak slowly and carefully, trying to apply the right rule. This slows down your learning and makes you sound unnatural. Let me show you what happens when you stop studying grammar and start using the pattern recognition method. In the first month, you might feel confused. You're used to analyzing sentences, and now you're just listening. Your brain is adjusting to this new way of learning. This is normal. In the second month, you start to notice patterns. You begin to hear repeated phrases and expressions. Your brain is collecting data and starting to recognize common structures. In the third month, you start to feel what sounds right. You can't explain why, but some sentences sound correct to you and others sound wrong. This is your language intuition developing. In the fourth month, you start using patterns naturally. You don't think about grammar rules. You just use the patterns you've heard many times. Your speaking becomes more natural. In the fifth month, you become more confident. You realize that you can communicate well without perfect grammar. You start focusing on your message instead of your mistakes. In the sixth month, something magical happens. You start thinking in English. The patterns become so automatic that you don't translate from your native language anymore. English starts to feel natural. This timeline might be different for everyone, but the process is the same. Natural learning takes time, but the results are much better than grammar study. So what should you do instead of studying grammar? Here are the key steps. First, choose English content that you find interesting and can understand about 90%. This could be podcasts, YouTube videos, TV shows, or audiobooks. The important thing is that you enjoy it and can follow the main ideas. Second, listen to this content regularly. Don't analyze the grammar. Don't stop to look up every word. Just listen and let your brain absorb the patterns. Third, when you hear a phrase or expression that you like, repeat it to yourself. Don't worry about the grammar rule behind it. Just practice using the pattern. Fourth, try to use the patterns you hear in your own speaking. Don't worry about making mistakes. Focus on communication, not perfection. Fifth, when someone corrects you, don't feel embarrassed. Thank them and repeat the correct pattern. This is how you learn naturally. Sixth, be patient. Natural learning takes time, but the results are permanent. Grammar rules can be forgotten, but patterns learned naturally stay with you forever. Let me tell you about some of my students who stopped studying grammar and started using the pattern recognition method. Maria was a grammar expert. She could explain every rule in English, but she couldn't have a natural conversation. I convinced her to stop studying grammar and start listening to English podcasts about cooking, her favorite hobby. After 6 months, Maria's speaking transformed. She still couldn't explain grammar rules, but she could cook with English-speaking friends and have natural conversations about recipes, ingredients, and cooking techniques. She learned to use complex grammar naturally, without thinking about rules. Carlos was a business student who studied grammar for years but couldn't speak confidently in meetings. I suggested he stop studying grammar and start watching English business videos and listening to business podcasts. Within a year, Carlos was speaking confidently in international business meetings. He used complex business English naturally. He couldn't name the grammar structures he was using, but he communicated effectively and professionally. These students succeeded because they stopped analyzing English and started experiencing English. They stopped studying about the language and started using the language. So, my friend, are you ready to stop studying grammar? Are you ready to start learning English the way your brain naturally learns languages? I know this might feel scary. Grammar rules feel safe because they're concrete and logical. Pattern recognition feels uncertain because it's intuitive and natural. But think about this. You already learned one language perfectly without studying grammar. You learned your native language through patterns and repetition. You can do the same with English. The key is to trust your brain. Your brain is incredibly powerful at learning languages. It doesn't need grammar rules. It needs examples, patterns, and repetition. Choose English content that interests you. Listen to it regularly. Don't analyze it. Don't memorize rules. Just let your brain do what it does naturally. Remember, every native English speaker learned English this way. They didn't study grammar rules as children. They learned through natural pattern recognition. You can do the same. It's time to stop studying English and start experiencing English. It's time to stop being a grammar student and start being a language user. Your fluent English future is waiting for you. All you need to do is trust your brain and give it the patterns it needs to learn naturally. Thank you for watching, and remember, your brain already knows how to learn languages. You just need to let it do its job. Good luck on your English learning journey.